On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected.
Thank you to all our amazing channel members for your generous support.
Ed Sullivan, the iconic American television host whose name became synonymous with the rise of mass entertainment, died of esophageal cancer on October 13, 1974, at the age of 73. His passing marked the end of an era in broadcasting, when one man's taste and intuition could shape the trajectory of popular culture. Sullivan's death from a disease linked to heavy smoking reflected a generational reality of mid-20th century America, an age that celebrated glamour and stress-filled success, often at the expense of health and rest. His departure symbolized not only the loss of a television pioneer, but also the fading of a shared cultural space in an increasingly fragmented media landscape. Born in 1901, Sullivan rose from a newspaper sports writer to a towering figure in television history, hosting the Ed Sullivan Show from 1948 to 1971. His Sunday night variety program became a cultural ritual, uniting millions of households in front of their televisions. Sullivan introduced America to a breathtaking range of talent, from Elvis Presley and the Beatles to Ella Fitzgerald and the Supremes, acting as a gatekeeper to stardom during a time when television was still young and idealistic. His death, just 3 years after the show's conclusion, felt like the closing curtain on the era of collective viewing, when a single broadcast could shape national identity. The immediate consequences of Sullivan's death were widespread reflection and reverence. Newspapers and television tributes remembered him not for his showmanship — he was famously stiff and awkward — but for his unwavering belief in cultural diversity. He gave a national platform to African-American artists, comedians, and emerging countercultural acts, bridging divides during a time of deep racial and generational tension. His absence left a void that no subsequent host fully filled. Television, increasingly fragmented by specialization, would never again have a unifying figure of such influence. In death, Ed Sullivan's legend only grew. His name remains shorthand for discovery and for the golden age of television, a time when the medium felt communal, hopeful, and alive with possibility. His story reminds us of humanity's fascination with connection and legacy, how we seek to preserve our voices through the technologies that outlast us. Through reruns, documentaries, and the countless artists whose careers he launched, Sullivan endures as more than a man. He is a symbol of the power of shared experience. His death underscores a universal truth, that while time silences individuals, the moments they create in the public imagination can echo across generations, immortalized in light, laughter, and song. Gary Collins, the affable American actor and television host, passed away on October 13, 2012 in Biloxi, Mississippi, at the age of 74. His death was attributed to natural causes, specifically liver failure, following years of health challenges. Collins's passing marked the quiet conclusion of a career that had once embodied the optimism and versatility of mid-20th century American television. His death, while not shocking or scandalous, reflected a broader cultural transition, the fading of a generation of entertainers who had defined television's early years with charm, dignity, and accessibility. Born in 1938, Collins began his career as a character actor in the late 1950s, appearing in popular shows like Perry Mason, The Virginian, and The $6 Million Man. However, it was his role as a television personality that cemented his place in American households. Hosting programs such as Our Magazine, for which he won an Emmy in 1983, and serving as a guest host for the Miss America pageant, Collins represented a type of performer deeply trusted by viewers. The genial, all-American man who could glide between Hollywood glamour and everyday relatability. His on-screen warmth mirrored an era when television was the nation's gathering place, offering comfort and continuity amid social and political upheaval. The immediate response to his death was respectful remembrance rather than media frenzy. Fans and colleagues praised his professionalism and kindness, while television historians noted how his career reflected a time before cynicism came to dominate entertainment. Collins's passing also rekindled appreciation for the forgotten era of daytime and variety television, formats that fostered connection and authenticity in ways modern media rarely replicates. His death did not spark monumental cultural shifts, but it did crystallize his legacy as part of the generation that built the foundations of American broadcast entertainment. Collins's life and work remind us of the enduring value of sincerity in an industry often defined by spectacle. In reflecting on his passing, we are reminded that mortality is not always marked by grand tragedy, but by the gradual fading of familiar voices that once anchored our collective experience. Humanity immortalizes such figures not through controversy or myth, but through memory, reruns, archives, and quiet gratitude for the companionship they offered through screens. Gary Collins's death reminds us that influence can be gentle yet lasting, living on in the warmth of a voice that once made millions feel at home. Guillaume Depardieu's death in 2008 marked a haunting echo of both artistic brilliance and human fragility. Born into one of France's most celebrated acting dynasties, the son of Gérard Depardieu seemed destined for greatness. Yet his life unfolded as a turbulent rebellion against fame, legacy, and his own inner torment. At just 37 years old, Guillaume died in a Paris hospital from pneumonia that developed while he was filming in Romania. His body, already weakened by years of illness and addiction, could not withstand the infection. His death was natural in cause but deeply symbolic, an end shaped by a life of struggle against the very forces that had defined him. Guillaume's battle with mortality began long before that fatal illness. A motorcycle accident in 1995 led to the amputation of his right leg, an event that reshaped both his physical and emotional life. In the following years, he fought through pain, drug dependence, and public scrutiny, yet his performances remained raw and magnetic. His portrayal of fractured souls in films like Les Apprentis and Les Enfants du Siècle reflected the restlessness of a generation seeking authenticity in an age of inherited fame and media performance. His untimely death became a somber reflection of the cost of living intensely in a culture that often devours its artists. The immediate aftermath of Guillaume's passing was met with both grief and reflection across France. For many, he was the anti-star, a man who refused to conform to cinematic polish or social expectation. His death reignited discussions about the pressures of artistic inheritance and the emotional toll of fame. In contrast to his father's legendary stature, Guillaume's legacy became one of tragic sincerity, a reminder that artistic genius and personal chaos often walk hand in hand. In the years since, Guillaume Depardieu has been remembered as an emblem of vulnerability and rebellion within French cinema. His image, brooding, defiant, yet wounded, continues to appear in retrospectives and tributes, his story immortalized as a cautionary and poetic tale. His death, like his life, underscores humanity's eternal tension between creation and self-destruction, between the desire for immortality and the inevitability of decay. Through remembrance, we transform loss into art, ensuring that figures like Depardieu live on, not as fallen stars, but as enduring reflections of the human soul. Jean Peters's death in 2000 marked the quiet end of a life that had long been lived away from Hollywood's blinding spotlight. Once one of 20th Century Fox's most luminous stars, Peters was celebrated for her intelligence, natural beauty, and independence, qualities that set her apart in the golden age of cinema. She passed away at the age of 73 from leukemia in Carlsbad, California, a natural death that came after decades of deliberate withdrawal from public life. Her passing reflected not just the mortality of a screen legend, but also the fading of an era when glamour and mystery defined the image of womanhood in American cinema. During her career, Peters starred in notable films such as Pick Up on South Street, 1953, and Viva Zapata, 1952, where she held her own alongside Hollywood icons like Marlon Brando and Richard Widmark. Her characters were often tough yet vulnerable, mirroring the post-war ideals of strength, independence, and quiet resilience. However, her life took an extraordinary turn when she married reclusive billionaire Howard Hughes in 1957. Their union thrust her into a world of secrecy and seclusion that would eventually define her later years. Following their divorce, Peters consciously stepped away from Hollywood, choosing privacy over fame, a decision that, in its own way, challenged the cultural obsession with celebrity that dominated mid-century America. The immediate response to her death was one of subdued remembrance. Unlike many of her contemporaries, there were no sensational headlines or public scandals. Instead, the tributes emphasized her dignity, intellect, and decision to live life on her own terms. In an industry that often demanded conformity, Peters' quiet retreat became part of her legend. Her death symbolized the passing of a generation of stars who valued mystique and restraint over the relentless exposure that would later define celebrity culture. Today, Jean Peters is remembered as a symbol of grace and independence in Hollywood history. Her choice to walk away from fame and her peaceful passing after a life lived largely out of sight invites reflection on the transient nature of beauty, power, and fame. In remembering her, we honor the idea that legacy isn't only built through constant visibility, but through the courage to remain true to oneself even as the world watches. Her death, serene yet symbolic, reminds us that in the end, dignity can be the greatest form of immortality. Al Martino's death in 2009 marked the end of a remarkable career that bridged two golden ages of entertainment: the crooner era of post-war America and the cinematic renaissance of the 1970s. Martino passed away peacefully at his childhood home in Springfield, Pennsylvania, at the age of 82. His death was natural, attributed to age-related causes, yet it carried symbolic resonance. Martino represented a kind of performer that no longer existed by the 21st century, the gentleman singer whose smooth voice and emotional sincerity defined a generation's soundtrack. Born Alfred Cini to Italian immigrants, Martino rose to fame in the early 1950s with hits like Here in My Heart, a song that became the first ever #1 single on the UK singles chart. His success reflected post-war optimism and the romantic sensibility that shaped mid-century popular music. But Martino's career also mirrored the turbulent shifts of his era. In the 1950s, his rise was disrupted by the dark undercurrents of organized crime that lurked behind parts of the music industry. After being pressured by mob figures to surrender his management rights, Martino fled to Britain for safety, returning only years later to rebuild his career, a testament to resilience and the gritty realities behind the glamour. His most famous later role came not through music but film: Johnny Fontaine in The Godfather, 1972. The character, loosely inspired by Frank Sinatra, allowed Martino to embody the tension between artistry, fame, and corruption, an echo of his own life's experiences. That performance immortalized him for a new generation, blurring the lines between fiction and reality. When Martino died, tributes poured in from both the music and film communities. His passing was felt as the quiet closing of an era, one that valued melody, storytelling, and authenticity. While newer genres had long overtaken the crooner style, Martino's legacy endured as a symbol of integrity and perseverance in an industry often marked by volatility. In remembering Al Martino, we reflect on how music and cinema preserve human emotion across time. His life reminds us that fame, like melody, fades, but artistry lingers. Through the enduring strains of his songs and his iconic film presence, Martino achieved what all artists seek: a voice that continues to echo long after silence falls. Gwen Wells's death in 1993 was both quiet and deeply poignant, a tragic end that reflected the fleeting and fragile nature of Hollywood dreams. She died of bowel cancer at the age of 42 in Santa Monica, California, after a difficult illness that cut short a career defined by authenticity and artistic risk-taking. Her passing was not just the loss of a gifted actress, but a reminder of the unpredictable, often unforgiving path of women in independent cinema during the 1970s and 1980s. Wells was best known for her performances in Nashville and California Split, both directed by Robert Altman. In Nashville, she portrayed Suleen Gay, a struggling singer whose naivety and heartbreak mirrored the disillusionment of an America caught between post-Vietnam optimism and the creeping cynicism of the entertainment industry. Wells's performance was raw, vulnerable, and hauntingly real, so much so that it blurred the line between actress and character. When she succumbed to cancer less than 2 decades later, it felt almost as though one of Altman's tragic dreamers had stepped off the screen into real life. Her death in the early 1990s came during a transitional period for Hollywood, when the studio system was giving way to independent film movements that valued honesty over glamour. Wells's career, marked by intimate, character-driven storytelling, anticipated this shift. But her illness deprived her of the chance to take part in the renaissance she helped inspire. Her passing underscored the vulnerability of artists who worked outside the safety of mainstream fame and fortune. The response to her death was subdued, yet heartfelt. Colleagues remembered her as fearless, a performer who rejected vanity in pursuit of truth. She became a symbol of the unsung actors who shaped American film with quiet depth rather than spectacle. In remembering Gwen Wells, we confront cinema's power to immortalize human fragility. Her legacy reminds us that mortality and art are intertwined. Through film, an ephemeral life gains permanence. Though her career was brief, the emotional honesty she brought to her roles continues to resonate, reflecting humanity's enduring desire to find beauty in impermanence and meaning in memory. Bea Benadér's death in 1968 marked the end of an era in American entertainment, a time when television was transitioning from the golden age of radio to a new visual storytelling frontier. Her passing at age 62 from lung cancer reflected both the personal cost of a lifelong smoking habit and the changing cultural attitudes toward health and celebrity in mid-20th century America. Born in 1906, Benaderet was a voice and television pioneer, celebrated for her warmth, impeccable timing, and versatility. Before she became widely recognized as Kate Bradley, the matriarch of Petticoat Junction, she had already lent her voice to beloved characters like Betty Rubble on The Flintstones and Granny in Looney Tunes. Her work bridged the early days of radio comedy and the booming age of television, making her a familiar voice long before she became a familiar face. By the mid-1960s, Benaderet was at the height of her television fame. However, in 1967, she was diagnosed with lung cancer. Despite undergoing surgery and radiation, her condition worsened. She continued to appear on Petticoat Junction as long as her health allowed, a testament to her professionalism and devotion to her craft. When she passed away in October 1968, the show and her audience felt her absence deeply. Her character was quietly written out, and the series never quite regained its earlier charm. Her death occurred at a cultural turning point. The late 1960s were defined by societal upheaval, civil rights movements, the Vietnam War, and changing gender roles. Benadere's wholesome on-screen persona, representing stability, kindness, and family unity, contrasted sharply with the turbulence of her time. In this sense, her passing symbolized the fading of the simpler, idealized vision of American life that early television so often portrayed. The industry remembered her not with scandal or spectacle, but with affection. Her colleagues, including Mel Blanc and Paul Henning, praised her as one of the most gifted comedic voices in entertainment history. Benadere's death reminds us of the quiet power of performers who shape culture through relatability rather than celebrity. She lives on in the laughter of the characters she voiced and the comfort of the worlds she helped create. Proof that art, when sincere, transcends mortality and continues to echo in the collective memory.